Hi, this is Robert Shear with our weekly conversation between myself and Ray McGovern, who was a CIA analyst for 27 years. And he was involved in advising Ronald Reagan's administration, Gerald Ford before that, and even Richard Nixon about Russia. He's fluent in the language. He was an expert on many things, arms control or so forth. And we do this weekly show, but this week I really need you, Ray, because I don't know what's going on with the world. Uh, Donald Trump seems to have everyone angry with him, and even from Taiwan to communist China to right up one side and up the other. At the same time, he's threatening Iran with the and that means the Iranian people, with the most devastating attack they could imagine if they don't renegotiate the arms control or nuclear arms control idea or prohibiting nuclear arms that he actually turned his back on when the first time he was president. So why don't you enlighten us? And at the same time, are we going to war with China? What's this all about?
Well, thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me back. Lots is happening, and most recently, yesterday, and now today, the focus has been on the Iranian nuclear program, such as it is. Now, just to remind people, the intelligence community decided back in 2007 in a very formal national intelligence estimate subscribed to by all 16 intelligence agencies at the time, with high confidence unanimously, that Iran had stopped working on a nuclear weapon at the end of 2003 and had not resumed work. Now, that was by edict of Khamenei, the supreme leader. The most recent U.S. intelligence assessment, just 2 weeks old now, reiterates that judgment and says there is no indication that Khamenei is going to reestablish the nuclear program, which Khamenei prohibited back at the end of 2003. Count them, 22 years. Okay, so we're talking about a non-existent nuclear weapons program. Now, there are lots of people that like to confuse the uranium enrichment with a weapon. Suffice it to say that we've got monitoring devices. The IAEA does have the same. We have satellite uh, imagery of all kinds that would let us know immediately or within a week whether Iran had reversed this decision, whether it had persuaded the supreme leader, well, no, this is okay under Islam, we can do this. And they reversed it, they went working for a nuclear weapon. So this is the context, okay? Now, Trump, earlier this year, laid down firm conditions which no one would accept as a sovereign country, saying what Iran had to do to avoid the worst. Bomb, 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 Iran, like John McCain, okay? Now, those conditions were completely unreasonable, and they were designed to make sure that they could say, oh, so Iran would not want to accept these. Now we go eliminate ourselves with the help of the Israelis, or vice versa, Iran's nuclear program. Well, it didn't work, okay? It didn't work for one main reason, and that is that, as the old Soviets used to say, the balance of power, or the correlation of forces in the world, has switched dramatically. There's no longer one superpower like there was ever since World War II, ever since the Soviet Union imploded. Now it's two against one, folks. It's Russia and China against the United States. Russia and China is going to play a major role, including vis-a-vis Iran. And so what happened was, when the Russians and the Chinese learned that Netanyahu was going to be in Washington yesterday, they said, oh, let's convene the next day and put together what we're going to do depending on what comes out of those conversations between Trump and Netanyahu. Now, what came out of that was Trump saying, Oh well, yeah. Well, let's have talks with Iran. That was a good thing. Did Netanyahu want that? No, of course not. Netanyahu wants a war against Iran. Now, there are some people I should note that say with Trump with his disastrous tariff policy, with the market going down, although it seems to have stabilized today, with Netanyahu in danger of going to jail, for God's sake, in the bridal suite that they've prepared in the major jail there for his wife and him, there's a real impetus for these two to go and do a nuclear strike or a strike on Iran and divert attention to their from their political problems. I don't buy that. I think that that's not wasn't going to happen. And what happened yesterday convinces me that finally somebody, probably Steve Witkoff, you know, I mean, he's a real estate guy, but he's in the real world, not like what's his name, or Secretary of State Rubio, or this guy uh, Mike Waltz, or the other neocons or crazy people that Trump has around him. You have Witkoff. Okay, so what was the announcement today? Oh, the Iranian foreign minister is going to meet with Witkoff, not Rubio, not Waltz, Witkoff, but it's going to be indirect. In other words, it's going to be Oman, and the Omanis are going to be kind of the go between. So it still fulfills the Iranian demand that this be indirect. They don't want to negotiate under the kind of pressure that Trump has put on them directly. What's the outcome of all this? We don't have any readout. The talks in Moscow today between experts from China, from Russia, and from Iran, holding a joint meeting on behind closed doors, focused on, according to Maria Zakharova, focused on the Iranian nuclear program, have not completed yet. Okay. But it looks to me like we may have averted a likely war because somebody got to Trump and said, "Look, Mr. Trump, we forgot to tell you what happens. And we forgot to do a national intelligence estimate to tell you what happens if you're going to go bomb, 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 bomb Iran." Okay. So, what bottom line here is we have some breathing space. This will probably be the weekend before Witkoff meets with the Iranian foreign minister. That's pretty high level. Okay. And they're going to talk about how to get around what Trump threatened earlier this year, and how to escape from this dilemma that Trump put himself in. I'm more hopeful now. Of course, I want to see what comes out of the Moscow meetings that have just concluded. I would imagine it's pretty late there now, but we have no information. It was behind closed doors, and that's a good sign because the more private, the more secret, uh, the more privileged these communications now with Washington, as well as Tehran, Beijing, and Moscow, the more privileged they are, the better chance there is for Trump to be able to climb down off this terrible position he took
Well, and
and not attack.
Trump, to give him credit for a sanity that is not always present with him or any of our leaders for that matter, when he was talking about why he needs peace with Russia and Ukraine and so forth, both he and Vance talked about the dangers of World War III. So the complication now is that we aren't the sole power in the world. That had been the illusion with the collapse of communist Russia, Soviet Russia. And there are agreements now with China and Russia, and also including Iran. And so let's hear it for complexity, and hopefully saner voices will prevail. Where we seem to have absolute madness, and I don't know, we don't have to go through every crisis, but certainly the situation with Israel and Gaza seems to be getting worse, and it's certainly not a good sign that Netanyahu is there bending Trump's ear on what is already a genocidal horror. But the other is China, and Trump's tariff policies have had. I mean, they're actually even Foreign Affairs magazine, even the mainstream media is now talking about absolute chaos in the world economic situation with these tariffs. And as opposed to most of the countries which said, please give us a break, let us have a separate deal, and so forth, China has just responded to this latest increase of 30, what was it? Uh,
It's
Huge amount. Uh, they're saying, no, we're going to do the same to you. And this is now, we've never been in a moment like this. And I personally think, from what I know about China, that it's too late. The horse has already escaped the barn. They can survive. We can't just punish them and put them out of business. They've moved on to a new stage of trade and with BRICS and everything else. But what's your thought on it, Ray?
Well, I think you're right, Bob. China is acting like a great power, and its alliance, and I use that word advisedly, its alliance with Russia puts it in a very strong position. I mentioned before 2 against 1. That's what it is now. Okay. Now, in China's view, I would suggest that they view what Trump has done as a temper tantrum by a 5-year-old. Now, what happens when a 5-year-old has a temper tantrum? You wait it out. You wait it out till the kid gets all just so too tired. And then you threaten him with countermeasures. And then he backs down or he goes to sleep finally and you can deal. Okay? That's how they look at this. They're not going to sit down. Now, one thing with specific respect to Iran, China still depends heavily on oil from the Persian Gulf. They cannot they cannot envisage being deprived of what I think is about 30% of their oil consuming that comes out of the Persian. Last time I checked, that may be even more or less now. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that they're not going to allow the U.S. to do what Trump has very specifically threatened to do: bomb Iran without consequences. This time they have Russia right in there with them because Russia is equally interested. As a matter of fact, Russia has a comprehensive strategic agreement signed on January 17 with Tehran. Now that was a masterpiece. That was 2 years in the negotiating stage. January 17th. Well, that was 3 days before Trump became president. What did it say? It said that we are together in all respects. It's a little bit short of a mutual defense treaty, but it includes all manner of military hardware and all kinds of economic cooperation
This is
and
Russia and Iran.
between Russia and Iran, and that's new. Not only is Iran far better able to defend itself from air attack from Israel and even from the United States, back a couple months ago, when there was an Israeli attack on Iran, it all of a sudden stopped. Why? Well, you don't know this from the public media, but these stealth things, these stealth that cannot be reflected in radar. Ha ha! Guess what? They were locked on to by Iranian radar, so they stopped. Okay, so I'm saying this. This is important. Iran has a deterrent for the first time ever against Israel. Israel having its nuclear weapons, but Iran has hypersonic missiles that can deliver weaponry and has shown to be able to deliver weaponry deep inside Israel, weaponry that can really wreak havoc with with Israeli infrastructure and Israeli targets. So it's a more balanced situation now than Trump had been given to believe. And I have hope, I have considerable hope now that somebody finally got his ear and said, Mr. Trump, that's a lot of good, really threatening there. But Iran is not what you thought it was. And besides, Iran has two allies, virtual allies: China, which has a deep stake in Persian Gulf oil; Russia has a deep stake. Iran's right on Russia's border. Russia has always been hypersensitive to what goes on in Iran. They're not going to, as we used to say in the old days, sit by idly while you attack Iran. So don't let Bibi mousetrap you into doing something really stupid.
Yeah, and just as a little bit of history, we should remember that Russia is on the border with Iran, but also the United States, your CIA, you were not active in it. I know you're an analyst in the CIA, you're not on the covert operations side. There's a turnstile, and you couldn't go through that turnstile. You didn't have the special pass to get you into the terrorism side. But I know you didn't see it that way at the time. Just good patriotic Americans overthrowing governments. But they did overthrow the last significant secular leader, populist leader of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, and this is in the early 1950s, overthrew him. They are the ones who messed up Iran and backed the Shah, and so did Israel for that matter, the Savak as secret police. And then you get the Ayatollahs come in, and we backed Saddam Hussein in his war with Iran. There's no sense of history, so there's no sense of the extent of mischief, dangerous, life threatening, indeed planet threatening stuff that the U.S. has been involved in. I bring this up because we have a very good article on SharePost that I recommend to anyone by a very good historian, Jim Mamer, taught history for 35 years, talking about that mischief, and that Donald Trump now wants to change everything about how we look at our history, including the Smithsonian, by getting rid of anything that suggests that we were irresponsible, racist, or anything else in our history. We have to whitewash slavery. We have to, I mean, right down the line. There was no genocide against the Native Americans. And so when they look at Iran, they say, how did this country, which after all inherited a great civilization, I don't think anyone can dispute that, history of the Persian Empire, I mean, even Alexander, the Greeks recognized that. And yet, we're in a situation now where Trump is actually, before I got your report, I feel a little bit better about it, but he was actually threatening to destroy all life there. And it's a lot of people, and how do you hold them? It's like responsible for everything. I mean, you're talking about one of the world's great genocides, and maybe bringing on World War III. So I want to ask you now to segue about China. And you said something a while back in our series here about this partnership between Russia and China. You told me it was like in the days when we were in the Bronx, and you go out walking down the street and some guy bullies you, and then he brings in his big brother, and it suddenly changes everything.
Right.
And the change here is now that militarily China has been advancing pretty rapidly, but the ultimate, the nuclear war and all out nuclear, they still have Russia for that, and that's where, to quote Vance and Trump himself in their conversations with Zelensky about Ukraine, you don't want to bring on World War III. And yet with China, right now we're provoking them in every which way. I mean, here we benefited from China's economic development. They took us through the pandemic. They supplied us with everything: toilet paper, pens, computers. You can't be in an American classroom without looking at Chinese communist made computers. And by the way, nobody ever brings out why do we trust them, or why do we trust Apple's products that are made in China.
I
They only
don't.
bring that up to when they want to be demagogues. So we're in this insane situation now where one thing you cannot deny about China, they've lifted probably 400 million people out of abject poverty. They have certainly shown an ability to be a constructive capitalist nation, produce stuff that the rest of the world wants. And here we are now doing something that no traditional pro capitalist economist would ever advocate. We're talking about destroying any of the sensible rules of the road that brought us to a multinational economy. What is your take on it? If you were advising Trump now the way you advised Nixon, who at least had the wisdom to go to China and end the Cold War. And you advised Ford, and you advised Ronald Reagan, who saw that he wanted to make peace with Gorbachev. He didn't want nuclear war at the end. What would you tell Donald Trump now? Put on that old presidential advisor hat that you wore. Take your time, because if I'm playing Donald Trump now, I'm in need of a lot of wisdom here, a lot of education. So do it politely, but tell me what I got to know about what's happening with China, and is it folly or is it wise what I'm doing? This poker game.
Mr. President, uh, China has been criticized for being a communist country. Its its economy is very thriving and very resembling a capitalist economy, and actually they've beaten us already. So if you want to go back to Biden saying China is not going to be the most strongest economic power in the world on my watch, well, that's already happened. Now, how are we to look at China playing major league ball in the international? It's actually focused on bringing 400,000 Chinese people out of poverty. My God, that's Xi Jinping. Doesn't that last 10 years or so? I mean, yeah, but he's still communist. I don't give a well, Mr. President. It doesn't matter what I think, but when you look at whether it matters bringing so many people out of poverty, or whether it's more important to accuse these people of being Chicoms, as we used to say, Chinese communists. Well, I give the edge to bringing people out of poverty. Now, they've been focused inward. They feel threatened by the United States Navy and other things on their sea lanes and outside near Taiwan. Taiwan was agreed to, well, over 50 years ago as part of China by President Nixon. Now there has been some slippage on that, where Trump and Biden and others say, well, it's not really, well. So China's looking at this whole thing and saying, wow, what's going on here? We must build up our Navy, and they have. They have a shipbuilding capacity that's second to none, actually, second not to Russia, not to the US. So they're saying, wow, what's the threat? The threat is from the United States. Who else is threatened? Oh, Russia's threatened. How do we know that Russia's threatened? Because they're trying to build up Ukraine into a bastion for NATO, threatening Russia right there in Europe. So this is the cardinal event. It's very seldom referred to, Bob. But when Putin and his military decided that they had been hoodwinked, that there was no prospect of dealing with the West, given the Minsk Accords had been deliberately violated and people bragging about it, they went into Ukraine. But before, and this is the teaching point here, before Putin decided to go ahead and invade Ukraine, what did he do? He went up to Beijing on the 4th of February, 2022, 2000, yeah, well, right, yeah, 2022. And he said, look, Xi Jinping, comrade Xi, good friend, I don't know how to break this to you, because I know that your foreign policy is based on Westphalia. Okay, no interference in the affairs of other countries, no invasion of other countries, borders, sacrosanct border. We know, we Russians, that you take that really seriously, but we have no other option than to go into Ukraine. We hope you'll understand. Now, I wasn't a fly on the wall, Bob, but here's Xi Jinping. You mean you're going to invade Ukraine? Yes. Not until after the Winter Olympics are finished, right? Oh, of course not. The Winter Olympics are finished on the 20th of February. We all know what happened on the 21st, 22nd, 20th, the invasion on the
You
20th.
should remind people the Olympics were in China.
I'm sorry?
The Olympics were in China. That's what
Oh,
I
the
was.
Olympics were in Beijing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, that's a cardinal fact there. Okay. So, now was that the only thing? No. But then it was, as Bob remembered, all of a sudden Putin knew that he had a big brother, a really big brother that would support him in this. And what happened to Chinese rhetoric? Was it Westphalia? Westphalia? No, they carved out an exemption for Putin on Ukraine. They started saying, look, every country needs to pursue its own core interests. The Russians have core interests in Ukraine. We have core interests in Taiwan. Core interests prevail, okay? And the rhetoric went on to say, look, this is what every country needs to do, what it has to do under the circumstances. Whoa! What was Westphalia? Forget about it. Now, they're back talking about Westphalia, but that was key. And nobody seemed to mention that or even notice it, but there was an alliance there, which I don't know if Putin would have gone into Ukraine without a big brother. I just don't know. We ought to ask him, okay? Anyhow, that's what happened in on February 4th and then February 24th, the invasion after the Winter Olympics in
Right,
Beijing.
but we want to keep these things short because uh, got to get on with this. So I want to bring it back to this question of now I'm not playing president now. I want to bring it back to what's going on with the world economy because right now a lot of first of all, China. I mean, the major employer in every major city and medium range city is the private sector. People forget China has changed a lot from the old Mao Zedong days, and they're quite happy with their own billionaires, but also foreign wealth coming there and so forth. And it seems that this suddenly the United States is saying this new world order, which the U.S. basically built, beginning with Nixon going to China, and we were very happy to exploit their productivity and get a lot of clothes and computers and everything else made there. Right now, we're in this crazy situation. I've never seen anything like it, where the whole world seems to be upset with the United States. I may be, I don't think I'm exaggerating. And China is now, in its meetings with the European Union and everything else, positioning itself as the responsible capitalist power, interested in trade, interested in honoring agreements, right? Uh, and so forth. And the U.S. is leveling with Donald Trump these preposterous tariff uh, demands. And it's absolutely crazy. I just saw where, big American computer companies and software companies have to now inform their customers that they're upping the price because they have to pay this tax for stuff to bring from China. So, do you think? I mean, we have a situation which there's two Trumps. There's Trump that believes in business, believes he can make us strong in manufacturing, believes we can be productive, and who says he doesn't want war. He wants to end wars. He doesn't want to start wars. And then there's this other Donald Trump who seems to, hey, bring it on, bring it on. Now at first people thought, well, yes, it's Israel, but Israel is special. I guess they're allowed to commit genocide or something in his mind. But now it's extending everywhere. And we want to wrap this thing up, Ray. But what do you think is going on? You were in the White House. You talked to our leaders in the past. Could you ever imagine this current situation, and specifically in terms of our destroying the world economic order that, as I said, we created?
Well, Bob, in my days of briefing Nixon, Ford, and Reagan, and their most senior officials, including vice presidents, I never had to brief a sociopath. I never had to brief somebody who didn't care about human life. Now, that's Trump. We ought to recognize that. And we ought to recognize that when we pretend to be a democracy and our government participates or enables or authorizes or arms or pays for genocide, we ought to do something about it. Okay. That's the Trump that cannot survive criticism. That's the Trump we ought to be out in the streets against. We ought to make sure that our elected representatives realize our strength. We don't abide by genocide. That's one Trump. Now the other Trump is destroying the economy of the world. That's gonna be resolved, but not anytime soon. Who's immune to this? Russia, China to an extent. China can make it. They can make it. They're going to have to be able to access our markets finally. So what's the big rub here? The big rub is what I started out with: Iran. Why do the Iranians hate us? We're nice people. Well, it goes back to 1953, and I think this teaching point needs to be made. The CIA was just a fledgling organization. MI6 in London took us by the shoulder and said, "Now, this is what you do when an upstart third world guy like Mossadegh, who happened to be not only the last, but the first in 3 millennia, the first duly elected, ordinarily elected head of Iran." Okay, this is what you do. When he says he thinks the Iranian people should profiteer, they should profit more from the oil under Iranian sands that we control, this is what you do. And they showed him how to do a coup. 1953. That's why they hate us. What was brought in? Savak, a secret service equally in terror and cruelty to the Nazis. Okay, they labored under that until Khomeini came in, and then what do we do? We supported Iraq for an 8-9 year war against Iran, during which Iran still forswore the use of nuclear weapons or any kind of weapons of mass destruction. That's the background here. Now, why do the Iranians hate us? Well, that's the history. The younger ones, you go to Iran, you'll find that there's a really, really enlightened view of what the U.S. really stood for before, and there are plenty of opportunities to get together. Now, I think the immediate problem is Iran. I think what happened yesterday with Netanyahu, where Trump apparently said, "Look, you can go ahead and try to attack Iran. We're not going to support you because we don't think that's a really good idea. We're going to go to negotiations. We're going to talk to the Iranian foreign minister, Steve Witkoff, is going to do that for us, and we're going to work out some sort of resolution here." That's good. So what we need to do is support Trump on the scores that he's trying to act sensibly, not only with respect to Iran this week, but with respect to Ukraine. Okay. Now, just to finish here, the reason why I always thought that Trump would not do the things he's threatening to do against Iran is because he sets priority on creating a decent relationship with Russia. Okay. Now he's criticized for that. Okay. But he still has that priority. And he needs Putin to let him down easy because Putin has won in Ukraine. Is Putin willing to negotiate? Yeah, he is. Okay. Is there leeway there? He enjoys incredible support and he can make a deal. So if Trump places priority on this, which I believe he does, he would realize that were he to attack Iran, that would be the end of it. The Russians would say, "End of it. We're going to give you a really bloody nose in Ukraine, and we're going to cooperate with our Chinese friends and the people at BRICS to make sure you're isolated." So I see great hope on both things, on Ukraine. Okay, if he's allowed to do this, I mean, there's lots of resistance to it internally, and on this latest development, if Steve Witkoff can talk with the Iranian foreign minister, even if the Omanis have to be between them, that's good news. And it was not so good news last week at this time when we really didn't know whether Trump would acquiesce in what Netanyahu wants to do. And what, of course, he wants to do for lots of reasons is to attack Iran. It's not going to happen now. I'm happy to be able to tell you.
Well, one hopes you're right in that respect. It's the old wag the dog thing. Is Netanyahu the tail or the head here? And he has such enormous support in Congress. You're kind of predicting that Trump is going to be better than actually Congress would be. They'd probably be willing to declare a war right now against Iran. I just want to remind people, because we sort of danced around history here, the first two countries to recognize Israel were the Soviet Union and the United States. There's some argument about who went first. And, despite their enormous disagreements in the Cold War, and ironically, we went to war against Saddam Hussein in Iraq, but as our former CIA analyst Ray McGovern pointed out, we backed Saddam Hussein for 8 years in his war against Iran, because we preferred Saddam Hussein, right, to the Ayatollahs. And so I want to conclude this just by saying, we have done our best, and I'll say, the United States. Not that there haven't been other bad actors. They always bring this up. Yeah, there have been other bad actors, but no nation has ever had the power that the United States has had, and continues to have an incredible power in the post World War II period. And I think, and if there are future historians, if the world survives, I think this will be looked back on the shoddiest, or one of certainly the shoddiest period of history, by people who claim to be enlightened, concerned about larger issues. In fact, did a lot of this in the name of democracy and freedom. So I'll leave it on that. And hopefully,
Just,
I will say, if they start bombing Iran, we're going to have do a show between now and next Tuesday. I'm hoping that your optimism is well placed here. Yeah.
yeah, Bob, just let me finish off with what I consider to be the most burning issue, and that our support for genocide. I was 9 years old. You were 12 years old when the state of Israel, a people without land, into a land without people. I don't know about you, but there were parades up and down the Grand Concourse and Fordham Road in the Bronx. It was a great day for freedom. The Jews had a place to go, okay? Nobody told me, maybe they told you, that it wasn't a land without people. Nobody told me that there were 750,000 Palestinians driven out of that land without people. That's what people need to know. That's just a smidgen of history. The rest is that the Israelis learned since then that they could get away with murder, literally, U.S. sailors, U.S. Teenagers, U.S. whatever it is. And it doesn't matter because of the hold that Israeli leaders have had on our leaders until maybe Monday, maybe, just maybe Steve Witkoff went to Trump and said, look, this is a bridge too far. You really want to get a nuclear war going? No. And he turned Netanyahu down, said, no, we're going to negotiate this thing. We're going to talk to the Iranians. And we know you don't like that, but, we're sorry about that. Go away. And I just hope that this is exactly what happened. I think it was. And it's a cause for some optimism despite the chaos that's going on in the world with respect to the tariffs and genocide.
Ray, we're prolonging this, but we always say we're going to cut it short. Well, let me just throw in the wisdom of somebody who's, I think, 4 years older than you. I'm not sure. You're only a kid of 85, right?
Right, 85.
Yeah, I'm 4 years older than you, so certainly pushing it. But let me just say, those were important years, because I had a clearer memory. And first of all, I'm Jewish, and my mother's family, they lost everyone in Lithuania. My mother had come from there. She'd already lost two sisters fighting the Tsar, pogroms against Jewish people. And I remember two salient facts from that. One is the U.S. was very late to get involved in the war, even though there were plenty of reports of what Hitler was doing. And that no, we want to stay out of it. And there were people in the United States that thought it was not our business, and so some of them were quite prominent. But also that it was Roosevelt who turned away Jewish refugees at
That's right.
Ellis Island and turned them away. And as a kid, I never could understand how suddenly the attention went from the Germans, or not to attack my Italian neighbors and friends, but also, and they had, as I did in my family on the other side, people who were on Mussolini's side or had their families were. And somehow I never could understand how the Palestinians got into this. And then, one last little personal note, I went there at the time of the Six Day War to see what this was all about. And it just blew me away that, in fact, the whole excuse for grabbing this territory, which had been, occupied by Jordan and Egypt and Syria, and all millions of people living there were Palestinian, was a war that didn't happen. It was a preemptive war, and that the U.S. was involved very deeply, even in the planning and approving of that, and it had more to do with the Suez Canal and great power politics. And you mentioned about England. The reason they were against Iran, the old Anglo-Iranian oil company, had major holdings, and so they didn't want to give that up. And so it's another part of imperial adventure and so forth. So, but the fact is, millions and millions of people die. It's not a television show. It's not, just propaganda. They die. Die. And unfortunately, unless they got nuclear weapons of their own in their mother country or somebody, most people won't care. And that's how Netanyahu could show up again in Washington and not be arrested under international law. There are very few places that he wouldn't be at this point if the uh, judgment of world opinion were to hold. But we're going to leave that here. I want to thank our
Hey,
yes,
Bob, let me I mean, we're going over time here, but I have to include this thing about anti-Semitism.
yeah,
Okay, now I know what that's like. There was a lot of it in New York City, where I grew up. There was a lot of it in my government under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And if you read Doris Kearns Goodwin's No Ordinary Times, okay, you can see that Eleanor Roosevelt was tearing her hair out. Franklin, these Jews are coming in on these big ships. You're not letting them off. You're sending them back. What's going on? And you know what? Franklin didn't say this, but this was the reality. There was no political benefit and letting a lot of Jews in our country. That's anti Semitism. And so, what did Eleanor, bless her heart, do? She had visas created and she gave them to all the passengers on this great big ship right off Virginia Beach and said, "Get off the ship, go into the heartland of Virginia, you're free." Okay? That's the kind of guts Eleanor had. That's the kind of provincial, anti Semitic view not only Roosevelt had, but Truman to the nth degree. So anti-Semitism is real, but my God, let's not anti-Semitism be used as a banner to justify genocide. And I'll leave it go at there. I just couldn't avoid mentioning that as well, Bob. Thanks for your patience.
yep. All right, that's it for this edition. I take your point. I think it's absolutely valid. The cynicism that underwrites all this stuff is shattering. But we'll get to that next week. And I guess, it'll always be with us trying to understand it. But I want to thank Joshua Shear for being the producer of these podcasts. I want to thank uh, Diego Ramos for being the managing editor of SharePost and for putting these things together, and Max Jones for doing the video that seems to draw a lot of attention. And I want to thank Integrity Media in Chicago for helping us with some funding. I want to thank JKW Foundation, memory of Gene Stein, for also doing that, putting on these different podcasts. Very independent writer who had the courage, as a Jewish person from a prominent Jewish family, to speak out for Palestinian rights. I'll always remember that when we're talking about these issues. There were plenty of Jewish people, as there are right now, speaking out against Israeli genocide, and it should be kept in mind. It's the main one would have almost thought this would be. Well, I won't get into it. It's a slander to somehow being Jewish got associated with supporting Israel's policies uncritically. I just, it's very hard to accept. But fortunately, there's a very large number of Jewish people who've spoken out against that interpretation. Uh, that's it for this edition of Sheer Intelligence, and we'll do it again next week, Ray. And hopefully you'll be right about Iran and that the world will not have been blown up in the interim. Let's leave it at that. Take care.